Hello and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Monday, April 14th, 2025, National Gardening Day, which you may have intentionally or unintentionally celebrated over the weekend. If not, today would be the day to put down that mulch or plant those spring plants. It's day 3 of Passover. Happy Passover to you if you're celebrating. It's the 41st day of Lent for Christians around the world and the day before Tax Day. I spoke with so many people over the weekend, friends and family that were working on their taxes. Whatever you were doing over the weekend, hopefully it wasn't taxes. I hope you had a great one. On Palm Sunday, President Trump marked the start of this Holy Week with a written statement renewing the administration's promise to, quote, defend the Christian faith in our schools, military, workplaces, hospitals, and halls of government, unquote. Then he played golf at Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach. He kept Secret Service and local law enforcement very busy over the weekend. He played golf there on Saturday as well as Sunday before attending the UFC event in Miami with a couple of his grandchildren and nearly half of the cabinet, if you didn't see it. Secretary of State Rubio, who lives in Miami, was there. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. FBI Director Kash Patel, HHS Secretary RFK Jr. and his wife, Elon Musk and his son. It was pretty wild. And everybody who was somebody in attendance, and there were a lot of them because it was Miami and it was UFC, all trying to meet the president, who is back at the White House today, where he is meeting with the president of El Salvador, and then I'll be hosting the NCAA football champion Ohio State Buckeyes at the White House. I'm sure somewhere along the way, Vice President J.D. Vance, an Ohio State alum, will be involved in that as well. On Air Force One, he was asked about the big weekend meeting between U.S. officials and Iran.
Nothing matters until you get it done, so I don't like talking about it, but it's going okay. The Iran situation's going pretty good.
Let's start with America Right Now and host Tom Basile.
High-stakes talks underway in Oman as we speak, as President Trump extends an opportunity for Iran to negotiate over its nuclear program, but warning the Islamic Republic to negotiate a new nuclear deal or else potentially face military action. Foreign correspondent Alex Salvi is live in Muscat with the very latest. Alex, what do you have for us?
Yeah, Tom, those talks officially beginning last hour, and the consequences for the entire region really couldn't be higher as these two sides meet in what's really a significant moment for U.S. foreign policy. Now, White House envoy Steve Witkoff leading the delegation for the United States and coming just one day after he made a surprise trip to St. Petersburg, meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin for their third meeting so far. We are still waiting for details on exactly what was discussed there, but Witkoff really building an impressive resume going into these upcoming negotiations. As we know, he advanced a ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine. He reached a hostages deal between Israel and Hamas, and now he turns his attention to Iran. Now, the Tehran's foreign minister just last hour giving us some details saying that these talks are indirect. The United States and Iranian team are seated in different rooms. This is negotiated by Oman's foreign minister. Of course, all of that coming against the wishes of President Trump, who insisted that these talks should be direct. And on Friday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt really laying out what exactly the president is looking to get from these talks and what could happen if no deal is reached.
His ultimate goal and the ultimate objective is to ensure that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. But he's made it very clear to the Iranians, and his national security team will as well, that all options are on the table, and Iran has a choice to make. You can agree to President Trump's demand, or there will be all hell to pay. And that's how the president feels. He feels very strongly about it.
Now, Iran's foreign minister arriving in Oman this morning saying that he's willing to give these talks a genuine chance. But, Tom, the clock is ticking. Of course, President Trump just weeks ago gave Tehran a 2-month deadline saying that they need to reach new terms of a nuclear agreement or else face military action carried out by the United States and Israel, saying that possibility is certainly on the table.
Alex, you follow this. You're our foreign correspondent. You talk to a lot of people who are in the region, also across Europe. Do you get the sense that the administration really thinks that some breakthrough could happen here, or are they trying to check a box as they assess what their options are for how to deal with Iran as the war in Israel moves forward, as its proxies continue to wreak havoc across the region?
Well, of course, this whole situation really did amplify after the October 7th attack. Israel blames the different terror groups in the region on Iran for being their backer. So when we look at all that together, I think there's an added degree of pressure against Tehran at this moment. And President Trump, by the way, he has not really been very wishy-washy when it comes to taking action against Iran. He pulled out of the Obama-era JCPOA. He took a drone strike, killing a top Iranian commander, Qasem Soleimani, all during his first term. This is something that he's talked about for the better part of 4 years coming into his second term here in office. And I will just say that the action that's being taken against the Houthis, it's not just exactly what is happening in Yemen, which, by the way, is just 600 miles away from where these talks are taking place right now. It's also sending a message to Iran. The massive buildup of military assets across the region is really sending a message to the Islamic Republic that the United States has the capabilities of really launching an attack anywhere across the Middle East, Tom.
Newsmax foreign correspondent Alex Salvi in Oman Saturday as talks between the United States and Iran got underway. Those talks are now expected to continue next week. We'll hear more from Tom Basile in a little bit, but our Rita Cosby, host of Saturday Report, discussed it with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert.
Many people believe this is a pivotal moment, obviously, given what happened on October 7th, given the fact that the Houthis seem to be weakening, Iran seems to be weakening within. Is this a pivotal moment, as many believe also that Iran is very close to a nuclear weapon? How important do you believe this time is to really put pressure on Iran?
It's certainly a good time, and I entirely compliment the president insistent on having these negotiations at this time now. Iran has been weakened dramatically because of the destruction of Hezbollah in the north, collapse of the Syrian regime, the weakening of the Houthis and also the destruction of Hamas in Gaza. So in this context, it is a good time, and also the very determined and forthcoming approach of President Trump. So this is the right time. However, I caution everyone that there will not be any immediate outcome. It's not something that can be worked out within a few days. It will take its time. It requires a certain patience in negotiating with the Iranians. They are great experts in dragging time. They are very sophisticated manipulators. They know how to negotiate. They have very good experience in it. So we have to assume that it will last a little bit longer. But if the president will carry on this approach, I think that there is a likelihood that it can succeed.
Well, that would be terrific.
In holding the Iranians off from any further development in their nuclear program. Of course, this is the objective.
Yes, absolutely. And boy, would that be wonderful for the world.
Rita Cosby on Saturday reported with the former Prime Minister of Israel. Both sides did call the conversations productive and, as I mentioned, are expected to continue the conversations this weekend. Aside from Iran, tariff talk, of course, continued to dominate the weekend headlines and the weekend shows. This is Lidia on Sunday Agenda.
How long before we start seeing China flags in social media bios, right? Along with a person's pronouns. That's where all of this is headed. China is now the new victim, replacing Ukraine. Within hours of President Trump kicking Zelensky out of the White House, Ukrainian flags were placed on every pole in the little business districts of my little New York City suburban town to show support for Zelensky. And I guarantee you now those same liberals are standing up and defending China, a country that promotes slavery and abuse, the same country, don't forget, that unleashed the deadliest pandemic on the world, killing millions by making the COVID virus in a lab and then lying to us about it, claiming that a magical bat flew from a cave and came into a soup and somebody ate it. I mean, yet somehow China has now become the new victim the left is grasping onto. Just look at this ridiculous Reuters headline. Has Trump canceled Christmas? It should read, President Trump holds our adversary China accountable for ripping off the United States for decades. After President Trump dropped specific tariffs down to a universal 10% rate for all trade partners, he jacked up China's rate to 145. China now tit for tat, increasing its tariffs on U.S. imports to 125%. Why is anyone shocked by Trump and what he's doing towards China? He has been saying that he was going to put China in its place for years now. He said it 13 years ago as he campaigned for president.
And I said, somebody said, well, what would you do? What can you do? So easy. I'd drop a 25% tax on China. And you know, I said to somebody that it's really the messenger. The messenger is important. I could have one man say, we're going to tax you 25%. And I could say another, listen, we're going to tax you 25%.
Trump always telling it like it is. I mean, even Time magazine announcing that China will not win a trade war. The White House continues to focus on Main Street, not Wall Street. Trump continues to prioritize the average American over major corporations. Numerous financial experts saying what Trump is doing is long overdue.
I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it and sell it back here. Never has an administration
400% tariffs. What would that look like?
I want Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field. This is not about tariffs anymore. Nobody has taken on China yet, not the Europeans, no administration for decades. As someone who actually does business there, I've had enough.
We've all had enough. And what Trump is doing, that's the art of the deal, folks, a tactic to get China's President Xi Jinping to the negotiating table. The White House knows that the American dream isn't the ability to buy cheap made in China baubles. Yet Democrats are enamored with China. They actually think that the Chinese Communist Party is our friend. You don't believe me? Look at this. I mean, are you surprised by Chuck Schumer there proudly waving the People's Republic of China flag in New York City? And that was just last year. This is ridiculous. You can support the Chinese people without waving the CCP flag, Schumer. You would never see a top Chinese official waving an American flag. Not here in the United States and certainly not in China ever.
Lifelong New York resident and Newsmax host Lidia on Sunday Agenda. New York Senator Chuck Schumer and other New York Democrats in that video that you cannot see are not only waving the China flag around like they're at a circus, they are also draped in a China scarf or something. President Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, was on Meet the Press yesterday, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on ABC's This Week.
Over the past couple of months, President Trump has called out pharmaceuticals and semiconductors and autos. He called them sector tariffs, and those are not available for negotiation. They are just going to be part of making sure we reshore the core national security items that need to be made in this country. We need to make medicine in this country. We can't be beholden and rely upon foreign countries for fundamental things that we need.
Again, that's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts was also a guest on the same show.
They talk about an emergency. They've got a 10% tariff on basically every country in the world, everywhere. What's the emergency that we have with Belgium? So, look, these guys are into chaos. She also said they're into corruption. She said chaos and corruption multiple times. And Stephen A. Smith of ESPN, which is owned by ABC, was also on the show.
I would hope somebody else would step up that's more qualified than me. But if it has to come down to me, it is something I would consider. Yes, I would, because I don't mind the thought of tussling with these folks at all, on the left or the right. All of them disgust me, to be quite honest with you.
I'm not going to keep saying I was right. I'm just going to say it one more time. I was right. And if you listen to the Newsmax Daily on a regular basis like you should, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And Stephen A. really made an excellent point. Listen to this.
They talked about everything from woke culture to cancer culture to abortion rights and all of this other stuff. But that wasn't going to win the election. And that's what we have to look at. What is it going to take to get the job done? That's why somebody who's a sports analyst, for crying out loud, is in the daggone polls. It's not somebody big up in me. It's an indictment against a Democratic Party that doesn't have leadership and doesn't have a vision.
Spot on, right? And now we go back to Tom Basile for more.
The left's stranglehold over information, both in schools and in the media, among other places, has attempted to change our national identity, change our priorities, our perception of American leadership. It's made us risk-averse. It's made us forget who we are. It's made us more dependent on government programming, more dependent on foreign economies, more reticent to utilize our leverage, and less likely to lead on a global scale against threats. We've also retreated from the vision of our framers and our own Constitution. Enter this guy, Donald Trump, and what I call his realignment presidency. And make no mistake, the left, the press, and even Wall Street want him to fail.
There is a lot of concern and fear, levels that we've rarely seen.
Donald Trump's tariffs, it comes as the president's trade policies continue to rattle the markets.
This could be the end of American exceptionalism. When all these countries are watching this disaster play out and we're insulting them, they could take their toys, they could take their money and say, I'm not investing in your stocks, I'm not investing in your bonds, I'm done with you, America.
The end. Really? But realignment is exactly what is necessary for America to maintain its global leadership position economically, militarily, and morally. Trump is realigning our domestic priorities toward reducing the size, scope, and cost of government. He's making substantial reductions in the size of the federal workforce, rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. DOJ has already discovered some $150 billion in savings to the taxpayers of this country. Trump is driving a program of reform for agencies and reducing federal regulations. You know, in his first term, he cut more than 2,000 pages from the Federal Register, a feat that he hopes to not only meet but exceed this time around. His efforts thus far have been far more successful than Reagan's Grace Commission, Clinton's so-called reinventing government effort of the 1990s, and others. His education reform efforts, as well as possible reforms for FEMA and other agencies, is realigning us back toward federalism and empowering states again. Even on the third rail of realignment strategy, Medicaid, Trump has opportunities. Does anybody really think there's no fraud, waste, and abuse? Some experts believe you could save hundreds of billions of dollars by reforms that will actually shore up the system and not decrease coverage. Trump is realigning our foreign policy back toward an emphasis on peace through strength and promoting core freedoms. He's demonstrated that he'll use military force against terrorists. He's backing Israel, and he's also challenging our Western allies to again embrace the principles that made our alliance stronger. As we discussed here before, he's realigning our policy away from lead from behind or a Eurocentric approach to strategy back toward American assertiveness and American values. Trump is also realigning our global economy to recapture what America has lost over the last several decades of unfair trade agreements that have been a boon to communist China's fortunes at the expense of America's middle class. Unfair trade practices that restrain the American worker and the American economy play into the hands of Democrats who want a larger dependent class in America, a smaller middle class, and less economic mobility. Reshoring manufacturing to any degree is going to make us less dependent on our greatest strategic adversary. Now, while Wall Street and the American left see no problem with 40% of our electronic components, for instance, being made in a communist country where slave labor, sweatshops, human rights violations, and medieval-style brutality are staples of life, Trump's efforts to marginalize China will help further highlight the hypocrisy of Western gluttony and greed. In this country, we ended child labor and we improved wages and conditions. We did that because protecting human life was at one time our collective moral obligation.
Tom Basile, who wore several hats in the George W. Bush administration, is the host of America Right Now, Saturday mornings, 9 Eastern on Newsmax. Going back to Saturday night's UFC event, the one person who was notably absent from the crowd, I mean the crowd, you know, the Trump crowd. Well, the whole crowd is the Trump crowd, but I mean the Trump entourage, right? Especially since his daughter was there, was Don Jr. My sources tell me that he was busy hosting a young executive of a South Korean electronics company at Mar-a-Lago. This was right after the Trump administration said on Friday night that it would exempt smartphones and other electronics like hard drives, computer processors, and memory chips. Items that are primarily made overseas would be exempt. Don Jr. has hosted a South Korean retail executive at Mar-a-Lago in the past. That's been well documented, but this was a completely different South Korean executive. Commerce Secretary Lutnick told ABC that the exception on smartphones and electronics, however, is only temporary. This is Senior Director of Counterterrorism and Advisor to the President, Sebastian Gorka, on Newsmax last week with Ed Henry.
But Japanese officials are rushing to Washington, other countries, more than 50 lining up. Are we about to say again Trump was right?
Of course not. Of course they're not going to say that. I mean, come on. All they deal in is fake news. But I have to say, am I allowed to say this? I'm going to say it anyway. Every Monday we have a meeting with my immediate boss, the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. And every senior director from the NSC is there. So I'm there for CT. There's the guy who's in charge of Europe, the guy who's in charge of Asia, the guy who's in charge of intelligence. And just the mere fact that we're having to, and this isn't a joke, Ed, nobody else has heard this yet, we're having to draft a spreadsheet of all the governments who've been tariffed, who are begging for phone calls to President Trump.
Yeah.
I think that tells you how effective just a couple of days of tariffs have already been, because that's the art of the deal, and that's President Trump.
So last one on this, look into the future then. You get a big deal, the art of the deal, as you say, on tariffs, and then the market's not only going to calm down, they're going to shoot up, as he's talking about. You get $7 trillion of new investment from Facebook and Apple and SoftBank and all these people lining up to do business in America. How does this play out?
I don't think there's a univalent answer to that. I think what we'll see is those nations that aren't rampant dictatorships and who want to have, a piece of the pie and good relations with the most important president of the modern age, they'll just come to their senses and they'll say, like Japan, we shouldn't have levied a 700% tariff on American rice into China. And then we'll start having equitable relations with those nations who want to be our friends and who want all boats to rise together. Some countries who are problem children, maybe those tariffs will stay in effect. But on the whole, the effect on the global economy, Ed, is going to be just stupendous.
Again, Sebastian Gorka on Newsmax with Ed Henry. So, President Trump is meeting with El Salvador's president at the White House today. Over the weekend, the Trump administration said it was leaving the return of the Maryland illegal wrongly shipped to El Salvador up to El Salvador to get him back to the United States, even after the Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to bring him back. And the huge Coachella Music Festival took place in California over the weekend. There's a reason that I'm mentioning this. The popular rock band Green Day was applauded and cheered when they changed the lyrics in one of their songs to something about kids in Palestine running from pain, even though it was Israeli teenagers slaughtered at a music festival in the attack on Israel that started the whole war in Gaza. On Wall Street, the stock markets kicked off the new week with a rally. Dow was up nearly 500 points. The Nasdaq was up nearly 400. Bitcoin and most other cryptocurrencies were higher as well. At the time of this recording, Bitcoin is up a little more than $1,000, just over $85,000. All right, be sure to keep up with all of the news on this busy Monday on Newsmax, N2, and at Newsmax.com. Also, make sure you're streaming the new Newsmax Plus so you get to see all of your favorite shows and hosts with plenty of expert analysis. I'm Tony Marino. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thank you, as always, for listening, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.